Hi, everybody. Welcome to 90 Minute Cocktail Hour. I'm here with my friend and fellow photographer, Alex Peterson. Um, yeah, me and Alex have been, shooting together for a bit. I started working for her studio, Idalia Photography, probably like 3 or so years ago now. And we met through a mutual photographer friend. Shout out Marianne. Hey, Marianne. Um, and yeah, we got connected, and Mary and Alex has taken me, under her wing. I've second shot for her, associate shot for her, and it's just been a really, really wonderful experience so far. So I'm excited you wanted to do this. Um, I my my hope, my goal with this is really to kind of like get to know people a little bit more. I know you really enjoy talking about like the business aspect of things, but I really want to like, hopefully find some things out about you aside from that. We've had many, many long conversations in the car, on the way to weddings, on the way home from weddings. And I've gotten like little snippets of your life, which I have found very interesting. So, and again, just for anyone who's listening, the only question that I tell people to prep for is, to just kind of talk about the path that led you into the wedding industry. So I usually ask people like, and Alex, I'll kick it to you now. So, if you want to like introduce yourself a little bit, but, then you can kind of get into, like when you were in high school, like what were you kind of thinking about as far as like what you wanted to do? And then, what was the path that actually like led you into wedding photography?
Yeah, I'm excited to get started. Thanks for having me on here today, Mike. Super excited. I'm glad we found a time that worked. So, yeah, so gosh, if I go back to high school, I thought that I was going to I was really into languages. I grew up speaking Spanish at home. My parents are from Honduras, and I spoke
But you were
French. I
born
studied
you
in
were born
France.
here, right? You weren't
I
born in
was born
Honduras.
here. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was born here. My parents immigrated late 70s, mid 70s. I was born, actually, I won't say when I was born. Uh, and yeah, I was born here. And then, yeah, I spoke Spanish at home. In high school, I was really into French. So I was really fortunate. My parents agreed to send me to France for a year. So I wanted to learn French, learned French, made some amazing friends, had an awesome experience. That's when I learned that really love to travel. And then after that experience, I thought I wanted to become an interpreter, like translating or interpreting something with languages. I had started to learn Italian a little bit of German, and I thought languages were my thing, and I was going to go to college and, do that. And then I started thinking, you know what, that might not be, like once I started looking into and, talking to guidance counselors start, trying to guide you and everything. They thought, maybe bring in some business into that, do maybe like international business. I said, okay, great. So I was open to the idea. Went down to GW University in DC, loved it, hated the business classes.
So I'm
So
gonna stop you there for a second. That's actually really, really funny because that's like almost exactly my wife's experience too. Like she was really into languages in high school. She went to Mexico for like a summer, and did this like immersive like Spanish program there, and then wanted to get into languages and wound up doing international business in college, but did not
oh, she
like
did. Oh,
the
wow, what a
business
coincidence.
aspect
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, did not like that. So after I took, some economics classes freshman year, I was done with that. Sophomore year, I had already declared my major as like a business major, but I registered for all French lit classes. So my counselor called me down and showed me my schedule and was like, what's going on over here? So that's when I decided to switch my major to French. So I ended up majoring in French literature. I minored in Spanish lit. and studied abroad in France and in Spain when I was in college, and absolutely loved it. So my plan was then I went back to the idea of becoming an interpreter. Right around then was when my mom got really sick, and my plan was to stay in DC. Like it's such an international, obviously, environment there, so it would have been a really great fit. But with my mom being sick, I just wanted to be close to home. So came to New Jersey, moved back home, and decided I was just going to try to find something temporary until my mom got better, and I wanted something that would allow me to spend as much time at home as possible. My best friend had just done an alternate route program to teach math, and she told me about it. So in New Jersey, I don't know if they still do it actually, but back in like 2001, 2002, they had this program where if you had a certain number of college credits and you wanted to become a teacher, you just had to take a course like, in the evenings, and they would give you a teaching certificate. So I decided, you know what, they need Spanish teachers. The class dismisses at 2:15. I can be home by 2:45, spend the afternoon, at home. So I thought it was the perfect fit. So that's how I became a high school teacher. I got a job real quick. The schools were all in need of Spanish teachers, so started teaching. And I was actually covering a maternity leave for someone, and then she decided not to come back. So in the spring, I ended up getting an offer for a full-time job, starting in September. So I took it, and that turned into a career. I taught for 14 years, mostly Spanish. I also taught French. This was high school, so it was a little bit of a mix, just kind of depending on the demand, for whatever classes were needed. So yeah.
So that's my, I thought about being a teacher for a hot second when I was in college, and I took like a intro to teaching class, and my mentality when I was a freshman was I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea, like, photography wasn't even on the radar, like not even on the map. I wound up doing the business thing, but kind of in contrast to you, I followed through with it and really lacked the self-awareness to be like, hey, this is not what I want to be doing. But yeah, I've heard of that alternate route program. So my wife actually, she wound up, following through with the international business thing. And, kind of like you was also like, yeah, this is not what I want to be doing. But she actually wound up going to China and teaching English in China for like 2 years. Yeah. And then, came back, got her master's, and she taught ESL for like 10 years. But she was like, fluent in Spanish and, or is fluent in Spanish. And it's really funny because anytime we go to like a Spanish speaking country, like, I can, when I'm dark and tan, like in the summer, I can kind of pass for Latino. Sure. So everyone comes up to me and will speak Spanish to me, and I just like point over to her like, hey, talk to the gringa, because like I don't understand you.
Yeah. No, it's a good skill to have though. So you're lucky you have your wife for all those travels.
Yes, she comes in handy. She comes in handy for a lot of things.
Yeah.
So when you were teaching, like, was photography even on the radar for you at all? Like, were you doing it on the side? Was it like a hobby or a thing that you were interested in, before that?
So immediately I was always into traveling. And I always had a camera with me. Honestly, growing up, we took a lot of photos growing up. Candid photos, no professional photos. My parents never hired a professional photographer to take, any family photos or anything. They didn't even have a professional photographer for their wedding, actually. So, but definitely a lot of candids. And I'm lucky that I do have a lot of photos from my childhood. And so it was just natural for me to bring a camera when we traveled, just because I was traveling to so many different places and I would come back and tell stories to my parents. And it's not like we had an iPhone back then to show videos or iPhone photos. You know, it was literally just the photos we took with the camera. So, so I documented all my travels a ton, and I really started to love photography. One summer I decided to spend, so I was, you know, as a teacher, I would have my summers off. So I started to take off on the summers and just go somewhere for a few weeks. So the summer, I think this was like 2002. I spent 4 weeks in Florence. I was taking some language classes and just, you know, camped out over there. So I bought a film camera and did not know how to use it. So I took a class, like a summer session class at Brookdale, just to learn to use the camera. And, you know, it was mostly developing film in the end, but I did pick up, you know, some tips after that. I actually knew how to use the camera. So, so it worked out. Documented my travels in Italy, and that was just kind of became a summer thing. You know, I would just go somewhere for a few weeks and take photos. And then I really started to love it. So one year, you know, it's hard to remember. I guess like maybe around 2009 or so, I decided to take photos of one of my friends. One of my friends had a little boy, and I said, you know what, I'd love to take some photos of him. Took him to Allure State Park, and I had the Nifty 50. I had purchased that, and decided to, you know, test it out on him, and loved it. And then she shared the photos with our colleagues, and you know, teachers, they're all looking, they'd love, you know, to just, you know, help out with lending me their, you know, lending kids for photo shoots and stuff. So I just started photographing people at work and their kids, and one thing led to another. I started a blog. I started my blog in about 2011, and I was just sharing it on Facebook, and people just started reaching out to me, and then I started charging $60 a shoot. You get all the digitals. And I thought the money was good. You know, it was a little side gig. I had to do, you know, little shoots here and there for kids or couples after work one day or like on a weekend. And it was just like a nice little side gig. You know, I was saving up for vacations in the summer, you know, travels and things like that. So it was pretty convenient. And yeah, that's how it all started.
Interesting. So when you were traveling though, like were you traveling with like you went to these places with the intention of taking photos? Like and were you like traveling by yourself or were you with like a group of people?
I went on these travels. Sometimes I would go by myself. Sometimes I would go with like a friend of mine, like one other person. I did do a few group tours. I had also started traveling with students. I would take students to Europe. So I took them. I took them to Spain. Actually, I also took them to Costa Rica one year. So I did a Morocco group tour. I did so many, you know, different, you know, types of travel. But I did not go with the intention of yeah, photographing it. Just kind of, you know, my mother ended up passing away in 2003. So at the time, I think I just wanted to get away. You know, I learned, I was only 25 years old at the time. So I learned at a pretty young age that life is short. It is very short. And I just didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to have this bucket list that always stayed a bucket list. You know, I wanted to start checking things off the list. And my mom always wanted to travel, and it was something that she got to do a little bit, not enough. And we had all these grand plans. You know, when I got older, we would go here and there and all this. And so in a lot of ways, I think I was just, I felt pressured, you know, to do a lot of things that I would have, I would have wanted to do with my mom. And I felt like it was too short. Life was too short. And I really just needed to get started with the whole thing. So
Mm.
I was gone as much as possible. I mean, anytime we had a break from school, I was going somewhere, 5 days. I mean, I think I went to Prague one time for like, Thanksgiving weekend, even if it was just like 4 days, 5 days, I was living at home, so, with my dad and my brother. So it's not like I had huge expenses, and I was just, I was making a salary, and yeah, I would just spend my money on travels. So
Yeah. It took me a while, I think, to, not a while, but like, I kind of started traveling like later in life than I like would have wanted to. And I remember very distinctly, like, I, so I had mentioned before, I graduated with that business degree, and I worked in like marketing research for about a year, and then wound up getting fired from this job and was unemployed. And I like want to blame the economy on like me getting fired, but it turns out like it just was not a good fit. And
yeah,
because this was like
yeah.
2008, 2009, and
Hmm.
like I look back on that time and I'm like, man, at first I was like devastated, and then looking back on it, it was like it was a course correction. It was like the universe kind
Right,
of
led you
steering
to
me
the
in a
right
direction.
path.
Yeah, yeah, it was like the universe steering me in the direction that I needed to go. But I was unemployed for like a year and a half, and I was like looking for jobs, couldn't find a job, and a friend of mine from high school was getting married in Australia, and like a big group of friends that I had from high school were all going down there, and I was like, for the first time in my life, I was like, I'm not gonna let the financial insecurity like get to me. Like, I think at that point in my life, I think I had been to Spain like once, like that was the only like international travel I had done, and so I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it, and I actually planned to get there a couple days early with like another friend of mine who wound up not being able to go, so like I wound up being in Sydney like by myself for like 2 days. It was like my first time like traveling,
Amazing.
by
Yeah.
myself, and I was in like a hotel room, like I didn't skimp on the trip, like I splurged, like,
Good for you. Yeah.
but like I had these 2 days in Sydney by myself, and I was like, what am I gonna do? Whatever I want, and I was like, I just remember being like so jet lagged, but like feeling so like excited, like
Yeah.
it
I
was
love
so
that
cool.
feeling. Being in a new city, that's the
Yeah,
best.
yeah. And on that trip, like I wound up going like scuba diving for the first time. I went like to the Great Barrier Reef and like went scuba diving, and that turned out to be something that I like really really love to do. I just remember like being on that boat, like coming back in from the reef and just being like, this is like freaking awesome. This is so cool. And that was another thing I did by myself too, because like my friends, they all wanted to, they like tried to pack in a lot of stuff, which was great, and I did too. But like I wanted to spend a little bit more time, up in that area of the country. I didn't want to be like bouncing around quite as much, so I did that, again by myself, and I was like, wow, this is really really cool.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
that's
came home
awesome.
and like within a few months, like got my scuba diving certification, and yeah, so
So fun.
yeah, like I'm glad that I was able to learn that lesson, or have that experience. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, those, there's nothing like travel, especially when you're kind of trying to figure something out in your life, it definitely gives you the mental space to think and see your own life also through, another perspective. You do a lot of, comparing, and you see, how people prioritize things in life in other countries, and what's the different way of life, and how people slow down. And, there's a lot of introspection that happens. I think I do that a lot when I travel. Even now, like we just got back from a family vacation, and I spent a lot of time, on the beach. When I'm at the beach or at the pool. Now our vacations are very different with our 6-year-old, but there's always that kind of natural gravitation to doing a lot of thinking. When you slow down and you don't have the inbox to get to, and the work, the to-do list and all those things.
yes,
So
and it's funny
totally
because
get that.
the part of that story that I had forgotten was I had literally bought my first DSLR like a few weeks before that trip, And, I just remember, being with my friends and like, traveling around Australia and like not knowing what the hell I was doing with this thing, and I think I shot in like auto or program mode like the entire time. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I came back with, this like memory card full of all these awesome photos that I had taken. And, it was like around that time that people started asking me like, hey, can you do some like headshots for me? Or like, hey, we want to do some engagement photos. And again, like not really knowing anything about like lighting or posing or, anything
Yeah.
like that.
So I guess you got
Just
started around the same time because you said that was around 2009-ish.
I went to Australia, yeah, from it was like Christmas 2009 to like January of 2010. So yeah, it was like
Yeah.
right around that time, 2010, 2011. I think I shot
Uh-huh.
my first wedding in 2011.
Okay, me too.
Um, yeah, yeah.
That's
But
so
again, like it
fun.
was one of those things where it was like a
Yeah.
friend from high school asked me, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was in way over my head, and
Amen.
it actually, in some ways, I feel like kind of traumatized me a little bit. Like, and I talked about this on one of the last episodes, but and I want to hear your experience of like your first wedding too. But I just remember not really feeling excited about it. I just remember feeling this like anxiety and dread and like, and when it was over, I just was like, oh, thank God that's over. Like because I wanted to do it, but I was also it was just like, you know, I kind of looking back on it, wish maybe I had, started off like assisting or second shooting, but like I just like threw myself right into the deep end and was like, I'm gonna shoot this destination wedding by myself. And
Amazing.
it was great. It was amazing. But it was definitely like,
A little
and I've
stressful.
had a lot of issues with like anxiety and stuff. So, and that was actually, that wedding was kind of a turning point for me with my anxiety where I was like, I think I need to, I might have to like address this, on a deeper level. But yeah, so like, what was your first wedding experience like?
Yeah, so for me, I had a friend of one of my colleagues at the high school where I taught. Her brother was getting married, and they did not have a budget for a photographer. And I had already photographed her children, my colleague's children, and she loved the photos and she thought I was great. And so she just kind of pitched me to her brother and said, I have this friend, she takes photos and you don't have a photographer, so what do you think? And so they asked me to take the photos at their wedding, and so it was a small wedding. Oops, microphone is falling. Small wedding, backyard. It was actually a backyard wedding. They got married at Alair State Park Chapel. So, so I ended up shooting that wedding. I did not charge them, but they ended up giving me, as a gift, a thank you gift, $100 gift certificate to Banana Republic, which was very kind of them.
That's so sweet.
And I had a Canon Rebel, no backup gear, no
Hmm.
lighting, nothing,
Hmm.
just
And
one lens. It was
that
like an
chapel,
18
by
to
the way,
35.
is not like the easiest to shoot in.
Right, right. But yeah, I did okay, and I got the kiss shot. It was a little blurry, but I got it. And they loved the photos. They were so thankful. And I mean, listen, it was free. So yeah, that was my first wedding. And
Did you remember coming away from that feeling any sort of way about wedding photography? Did you come away like loving it or just being like, "Oh, that was nice"?
I loved it. I
Hmm.
loved it. I thought it was fun. I just loved the energy. I loved the people, and I knew a lot of people at that wedding too, so that kind of helped too. They made me feel very comfortable, and it felt easy to me. I mean, I didn't, obviously I wasn't creating. If I, look back at the photos, I don't know if they would have paid for those photos, had I tried to sell them to them, but yeah, I mean, I had a really positive experience. I actually, I don't know, I just felt like it was kind of easy, even though, I didn't have any any great gear or anything like that, but with what I had, I was shooting on manual already at the time because I had, learned how to do that. So I felt pretty confident with that. Wasn't always choosing the best settings, but I was doing it. And yeah, I didn't think that it could be a career though. I never thought of that.
Mm.
I just thought this would be something I would just do on the side, if I was ever asked again. And a long time, went by before I actually did my second wedding. So I just did that one, and it's not like I was actively looking, to shoot more weddings. I was shooting portrait sessions. I continued to do that. The next job I did was an engagement session for my brother. He got married in 2011, and his wedding photographer did not include an engagement session. So I said, let me do your engagement photos. And I took him on a 3-hour photo shoot in Asbury Park. He was a trooper because he is not into photos, but he was just trying to, make me happy and obviously make his now wife happy. But yeah, that might have been my longest engagement session ever. And I shot that, and it was right around then that I started my blog. I was posting things on Facebook. I came up with a business name, and I just started a blog. I didn't have an LLC yet. My LLC, I started that in 2012. So it wasn't too long after that. But yeah, 2012, January was when I decided, you know what? People are paying me money. I already had like some spring sessions on the books. I was feeling super confident that this could turn into something, but I never thought it would be a full-time. I never thought I would leave teaching. I mean, teaching is such a stable job, and I had already been, I taught for 14 years. So at that point I had already taught, almost 10 years. And, it just wasn't a thought to ever leave teaching. This was just a side thing. And by then I had met my husband too. I met him in 2007. So we were traveling in the summers, so I would never think to give up my summers, to do weddings because I was traveling. We were going on so many long trips, 8 weeks here, 4 weeks there. So it really wasn't a priority to kind of become a better photographer. It just wasn't. It was just like, okay, if somebody wants to hire me to do what I'm doing and they like what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing,
How did
but
you
I
and
did
Jay
start
meet?
investing in gear. What's that?
How did you and Jay meet?
So we met through one of my former colleagues at the high school where I taught. She is best friends with my husband. I mean, she was dating my husband's best friend, who he's known since they were 4 years old. So very, very close friends. And we went on a double date. We went on a double date in Red Bank, and yeah,
And the rest
that's
is
how it
history.
happened. The rest is history. Yeah, that was 2007. We got married we dated for 3 years, got engaged, and then we were engaged for 2 years. We got married in 2012, which was the same year that I started my LLC, actually.
Okay. Did you start off as Adalia, or were you a different name?
I was always Adalia Photography. So
Okay.
Adalia was my mother's middle name. And when I was
Ah.
trying to come up with a business name, I knew, I was already dating my husband. I did not want to be, my maiden name is Elvire, and I just didn't want to be Alex Elvire Photography. It just didn't sound right to me. And then, I was hoping to get married, but his last name is Peterson, and it's just a little bit, it's not too unique. So, and there was already like there was a lot of Alex Peterson photography, or Alexandra Peterson,
Yeah.
So I was just looking for something else, something different. And a huge motivation throughout my life has been my mom. And I just loved her middle name. I thought it was so pretty. So, yeah, that's how Adalia Photography came to be.
Wow. I had no idea. Honestly, when I hear the word Adalia, I always thought of like a flower.
Yeah, a lot
But
of people.
yeah, but I had no idea it was your mom's middle name. That's really beautiful. So, you're cruising along. You have, maybe some, you said some like sessions lined up. You start your LLC. When did you start taking on more weddings? And then when did Jay start shooting with you?
So in 2011, I shot a wedding for someone that I knew. it was a friend of a friend of a friend, who needed a photographer, and she was paying me. She was paying me $500. So I was
Big
very
money, big
nervous at
money,
that
big money.
wedding. I know. So I was very nervous at that wedding. I spent the $500 that she gave me on renting backup gear.
Mm,
And so, it's not like I was making money on this. I was really just doing it obviously for the experience, but I was really nervous for that one because I had taken her $500. And so I asked my husband to come along. He's also a huge traveler, traveled throughout his whole life and always done travel photography. And he's more of like a gear guy. Like he loves like toys,
mm,
different cameras and his GoPro, and he has a drone, and like he's always into all that stuff. So he had a little camera, and I forget what it was, but I said, he was free that day. I said, why don't you come? And just like moral support, take some photos also. And yeah, so I just brought him along on that very first paid job, and we loved it.
mm.
We were just dating back then. Were we engaged? Yeah, we were engaged already, I think. And yeah, we were engaged. And so we started coverage. We didn't do prep for this wedding. We just started coverage. It was a Greek wedding. We
Mm.
started coverage at the church. And so I was, getting the groom's reaction inside, and he was outside waiting for the bride to arrive. And he got, those shots of her arrival and, waiting in
Mhm.
that, little room in the back where the church lady puts you. And he got some great shots there. And after that, I think we just had like a huge, like adrenaline rush from like, just the experience and everything.
Yeah.
And we loved it. And, we had just started dating, maybe a few years. And so I think we were just excited about, the prospect of like doing this thing together,
Mm. Mhm.
and making money. And, I think it was, we loved it, but we also loved being together. And we also, were excited about having this little side hustle. So there were a lot of different reasons why we were loving it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were spending all our weekends together anyway. So it was like the perfect thing to do on the weekends.
Right. Right. Yeah. I had Kim second shoot for me once, and we, and this was after we had I think we had two out of our three kids at this point. And yeah, I just remember feeling like, wow, we should like do this more often. It was like a date.
Yeah.
It really felt like a date. And obviously like we were working, but at that point with like two kids, you know, anytime we got to like be away from the kids together felt like a vacation. And I remember like we actually, I got to sit down with the other vendors at dinner time, and she was like, yeah, like this is a long day, and this is
She wasn't
she's like
loving it.
this could be like kind of difficult, but like this is so much easier than being home with both kids by myself. And like I get that. Like I would so much rather be. I shouldn't say it that way. It's easier to be at a wedding,
Yeah.
dealing with all of the craziness that comes with a wedding than being home with like all three kids. It's exhausting being home with all three kids. I love them. I love getting to spend time with them. But it is
Just not
exhausting.
every day.
No, not no. And seriously, God bless my wife for like being willing to do that so that I can spend 2 to 3 days a week shooting weddings. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I wish we could do it more, but then it's like who's going to watch the kids, and yeah,
Well, that's what
so
happened to us. Yeah, is
yeah.
that we became a husband and wife team. I got a friend. My friend of mine was a guest at a wedding I was at, and she took a photo of us. I remember, and so I used that on our website on our about page, and so I brought him on right away, and we branded ourselves, as a husband and wife team, and that's how we ended up. We were booking weddings, and we were that first year that we started the LLC. That was 2012, and we shot 12 weddings that year.
That's really
So
good.
it grew, yeah, really quickly. Everybody loved the idea of a husband and wife team, and we just loved, we were very passionate about what we did. We did our consults at our house. So we would invite people to our home. So they felt very comfortable, giving us their money because they knew
Mm.
where we lived, you know? Uh, and people just, yeah, they were just hiring us left and right. The following year, 2013, we went from 12 weddings in 2012 to 33 weddings in 2013. So we grew,
Wow.
really quickly, and I was still a full-time teacher,
Hmm.
and he's a college professor. So we were both still, working full time, and now we had this side hustle that was becoming, way bigger than we ever imagined. It just kind of happened to us,
Mm.
and we were booking over 30 weddings a year, consistently,
Yeah,
in those early years,
that's
and
amazing.
then yeah. And then it all changed when my daughter was born, going back to like what you mentioned about, being gone all day. And 2018, it was when, we were really serious about starting a family. We had been trying for a while, but it took us a while. And I got pregnant in 2000. She was born in 2019, so I was pregnant in 2018. So actually, we started planning a little bit before that. And that's when, we started thinking maybe we need to bring on other people just in case, just to have a backup. I had never, like you mentioned, like, oh, maybe I should have assisted or I should have second shot. Same thing for me. Like, it's not, I had second shot for friends. But it was much later, I had already been shooting for a while when I actually started to second shoot. I was just helping friends out here and there.
Mm.
I wasn't actively looking for jobs. It was just like when my friends got pregnant and she needed, another reliable shooter or something, so I would second shoot. But that's not really, I'm more self-taught. I really didn't learn from, those jobs because they came after I had actually, started my business and stuff.
Hmm.
But anyway, that's, right when I was pregnant, we started to take on assistants, to help me out at weddings. And that's how I started training my first associate photographer. And eventually, that's what allowed us to phase my husband out of the business because we didn't have childcare. We didn't have parents that could help us with the baby. And it was really, we have his sisters and, my brother, but it's not the same. And it's hard to, shoot 30 weddings a year. It's 30 weekends and, people have stuff going on the weekends. We didn't want to just drop off our baby. So I started phasing my husband out and rebranded. Total rebrand, took him off the website, stopped talking about my husband, stopped sharing about him on Instagram. No more husband and wife team. I cleaned up my SEO and made sure the Google searches, weren't coming up, weren't mentioning him.
Sorry, Jay.
And
Sorry, Jay.
yeah, people who followed us for a while were probably like, "What happened?" But it was for the best, because he loves his daddy-daughter days,
Hmm.
and now I don't worry when I'm at weddings because that first year where we still were, he was still on a few contracts, he's still on a bunch of contracts. That was really stressful. She was a baby. She was a newborn. I started shooting she was like 3 months old. I went back to shooting after she was 3 months. So she was
Mm.
so little. And I was constantly checking my phone, because we had left her with the babysitter.
Hmm.
And I was distracted, and
Yeah.
I thought, this is just not how I want to be on a wedding day. I don't want to be distracted like this and worried all the time because both of us are gone. We're sometimes, an hour and a half drive away from home. Something
Yeah.
happens and we're sharing a car. What do we do,
Right. Right.
Because we would drive to weddings together, obviously. So, yeah, so that's when, yeah, we phased him out and now he just, he hangs out. They go to Six Flags on wedding days. That's their thing. They have season
I love
passes
that.
to Six Flags.
I remember the first wedding I shot after Luca was born, after our oldest was born, and it was actually like the perfect wedding to shoot because it was like one of those like really short days. It was like a really late start. It was at Clark's Landing, and I was second shooting, so there wasn't like a ton of responsibility. And but yeah, I just remember feeling like really weird, like leaving my wife and my son for the first time,
Yeah.
and just thinking like, oh, like are they okay? You know, like, because those first, I mean, you know, those first like couple weeks, couple months, it's just, you know, it's just a whirlwind. It's just an
Yep.
absolute, like, you don't know up from down, left from right. You're just trying to like survive on, you know, catching a couple hours sleep here, a couple hours sleep here, and yeah. So I just remember that first wedding feeling like that, you know, and it was maybe like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks after he was born. And, you know, it was just an absolute godsend that I didn't have like, I had like a 4 o'clock start, you know, which like doesn't happen, you know, and
Right,
I think I
right.
was
Yeah,
home
you
by
got
like 10
lucky.
o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're definitely not getting enough sleep, and just the worrying, I
Mm,
used to worry so much, every little thing, and
yeah.
yeah, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
So,
I think, you know, and that's honestly like something that I didn't realize as a, you know, a dad, like, you know, cuz Kim, she has always been like very, you know, she's always I feel like been the I guess the risk taker in our relationship, or the, you know, the one who like typically isn't worried about things, and I have always felt like I'm the one who's like more worried about things. But then after Luca was born, you know, I noticed like a little bit of a different side come out where she was, you know, and a lot of it's hormonal, a lot of it's like, you know, these hormonal shifts that are happening that I had no idea about. I didn't like no one prepared me, or I hadn't researched like the things that happen after the baby is born, and you know, she was worried about things that I was like, it just totally caught me off guard. I was like, why are you like worried about that? And you know, so it was kind of a weird dynamic shift in our relationship too, where like I kind of felt like, oh wow, now, you know, I can be the one to kind of comfort her and to like help her, you know, feel, you know, hopefully a little bit more or less anxious about some of these things. But you know, I can only imagine, and I think we talked about, me and Danny talked about this in one of the previous episodes, like, you know, women who have to go back to work after having babies, like that's, you know, in the wedding industry, like that's, you know, God bless you.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I was lucky that I had a little bit of time. She wasn't an itty bitty newborn. She was a few months old, but I mean, I was pumping during cocktail hour.
Hmm.
And I had a little cooler with me, to figure that all out. And there was a lot going on behind the scenes. My timeline, I would just like write down in my timeline, like when I could pump and when,
Mm.
all that kind of thing.
Oh wow,
Um,
that's really
so
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then just being so tired after these weddings and having to be up at 4 in the morning, because that's when she woke up for her first feeding. So,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, it was a wonderful time. I loved, I loved being pregnant when I was pregnant. I loved having a baby, when she was little. I loved being a mom. But it was not easy. It was not easy. And then getting stuff done while, during the day, getting all the, just answering emails and doing the editing and, doing all those things, during her nap for the most part, her
Yeah.
naps while she was
Yeah.
sleeping,
They say
or
sleep
late
when the
at
baby
night.
sleeps, but like,
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
when would anything get
there,
done?
there was no sleeping when the baby slept. None.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot about that now, and you know, right, wrong, or indifferent. Like maybe I should have been thinking about this a while ago, but you know, I am starting to think about, you know, like what is my exit plan with weddings, and you know, for me, it's a little bit different because, you know, currently like the vast majority of my work is freelance, you know, so like obviously, you know, picking up associate weddings for you, second shooting weddings for you, and for other studios. And I, you know, I do book, I'm, you know, starting to book more of my own stuff. But for sure, with, you know, my kiddo's getting older, like Luca's going to be 7 in May. And, you know, he's starting to do a lot more like extracurriculars, and you know, I'm already seeing how like I'm starting to miss stuff on the weekends. You know, it's nice to have flexibility during the week. You know, like I'm there to like, you know, get him on the bus and get him off the bus and I'm home with, the other two during the day. Me and my wife kind of split that, and we take care of our other two during the day, and like, sometimes we'll like go for a hike, or we'll like go to the beach, or whatever. Like, it's exhausting trying to find things to keep them occupied. But all that to say, like, what is, like, I'm trying to think about, like, what is my long-term plan for these, for weddings, right? Like, because I'm not going to be shooting 75 weddings a year, hopefully in 10 years from now, because like physically I just won't be able to, like, my body will fall apart. And I know, like, you talk a lot about that too, and that's kind of like what you're building with your company. For me, like, I don't really see myself building an associate team for myself, but who knows, maybe, I don't know. But I think also, like, doing stuff like this, like the podcast, like, this has been, even though I've only been doing it, this is like my 4th episode, I think. This has been really, really fun, and to your point, like what you were saying a little bit ago about like the people at the weddings, right? Like, that's honestly been like one of my favorite part. Like, obviously the creative aspect of it is cool. I love getting to, be creative and see things, see light and see poses and see candid moments. But at the end of the day, it's like getting to work with you and getting to work with your team and getting to work and getting to like meet the couples. And, at first getting thrown into those really, at first getting thrown into a wedding day was very like anxiety producing for me. And now it's like fun, because
Yeah.
for the most part, I get to do the fun part. I get to show up and like be the face that they see, and be the face that they're like excited to see, because like usually when the photographer shows up, it's like, oh, now it's real, like now it's like really happening. Like, that's the part of the day, or that, like, those are the things that I really enjoy now, is
And
getting
that's just
to be
because
the.
of experience. Yeah.
That's
It's
true,
because
yeah. And I
that
feel like
experience is
once
everything.
I made the decision to like go full time with photography and just kind of like threw myself into it, and started just seeing anything and everything that could happen on a wedding day. Yeah, like, it definitely builds confidence, because you see things go off the rails. You see timelines get totally shredded. You see all kinds of crazy stuff happen, and yet, like, there really hasn't been anything that I've seen that's been like, you know, not reversible. Like, there isn't anything that's happened where like we haven't been able to rally and like get the photos that we need.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, 100%. The experience definitely plays into it, but getting to meet people like you, getting to meet like all the people on your team has been so
Yeah, I
fun.
mean, we have loved, I think you have just like fit right in. We have loved having you, join the team, and it's been really great, to get to know you. And, I look forward to when I see you, when I see who my second shooter is. I mean, all my second shooters. I love to shoot with all my shooters, obviously, but I see you, and I'm excited, it's, I look forward to every wedding day, not just obviously to capture my couple's weddings, but also just to get out there and be creative and work with my team. Like, we have such a good time. And going back to you mentioning the exit plan, I think that is so important, and not enough people excuse me, not enough people think about it. They think this is going to last forever. This phase that we're in is going to last forever. It's not going to last forever. And I mean, I taught for 14 years, and then before I made the leap to become a full-time photographer. So I left teaching in 2016. It's going to be almost 10 years. And after I left teaching, 2016, I think maybe about 2 years went by where I was not thinking about exit plan. I was full on. This is amazing. I love my life. All these wonderful things. My associate team, I started I was building that. It was gaining momentum, and that was really. I was excited about how that was going to allow my husband to stay home with the baby. And then probably a couple years, like maybe she was, maybe like 2 years old. That's when I started thinking about the exit plan, because I started thinking about what you just mentioned, missing things on the weekends. And I'm older than you, so it's, it's a little bit different. I'm also a woman, and I feel like it's, obviously it's different too. But I think, as as creatives, we really, and business owners, we really need to, everybody needs to think about that. You need to force yourself to sit down and make a 5-year plan, make a 10-year plan, and revisit it every year, because it's going to keep changing and nothing is written in stone.
Mm,
But it's important to go through that exercise of sitting down and really thinking about, what is this going to look like in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 10 years? And what can I do now to work towards that, so that it actually does happen in 5 years, in 10 years?
mm,
And that's been really helpful to me, to just kind of, work towards that, because it it allows me to prioritize. With business, there are so many things to do. There are so many tasks. The to-do list, I have to-do lists like for now, for this month, for this year. I mean, to-do lists up the wazoo. And it's hard to prioritize.
mm,
So you have to figure out how to prioritize. And when you have like a plan for where you're heading, it
mm,
makes it a lot easier. Okay, well, is this in line? Is this aligned with my goal?
mm,
Because if it's not aligned with any of my goals, then why am I doing this? Right?
mm.
Because I have a lot of other things I need to do.
Right.
So, I think it's definitely important to sit down and, and think about that and brainstorm, because we're not getting any younger.
Yeah, it's and it's been a theme that's been coming up in some of the other episodes, is like, for whatever reason this year, I've just been really feeling, the generational gap between like me and like the couples that are getting married. And not even that, but like even some of the younger photographers and like content creators that are starting to come up. And I don't know why. I find it like so fascinating and so interesting. And again, maybe it's just because like I'm going to be 40 in July. Like, it's like the first time that I've like really truly recognized, and I think also being a parent has something to do with it too, because I'm like putting myself in my shoes as a kid and looking at my parents and thinking about like, how old they were and like my perception of them. And like, my oldest is starting to like think about things like music and like sports, and I'm thinking about like my mentality when I was like thinking about, starting to be like a baseball fan and like the Yankees, and like my dad would like take me to games and stuff, and like my perception of him, was like this kind of, like mature adult. And in my head, I still feel like a kid sometimes.
I know.
A
I
lot
feel
of the
so
time.
young too. Yeah, no, I totally get that. Me too.
So there's this weird like dissonance going on between, having to like embody this like dad figure, but then also still feeling like a kid, but then being so much older than all of these couples that are like getting married. I don't know. I feel like I'm processing it as I'm like talking about it right now. It's just really interesting and fascinating to me. So like and I think that's also been motivating me to be like, all right, long term, this isn't, like you said, this isn't going to last forever. But I've also struggled with the idea of like goals and like long term planning. And again, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's just like always been my personality. I'm always like thinking about what is happening now, like what's happening right now, like what feels good now. And like that's fun and all, but there's for sure, I think and I think where I landed on it is like I definitely have some core values that are like really important to me. And for me, like one of those things is flexibility, right? And not being tied to like a 9 to 5, or not being tied to like a routine. I love that like every single day is different, and I've kind of like structured my life that way. And I also, we don't get to do it as much as I would like, but like, travel and like getting to give my kids experiences, like when we went to Mexico, last January, and, giving them the opportunity to like travel internationally. And like, we did the all inclusive thing, but we also spent some time like off the resort. We spent like a few days, going to visit Chichen Itza, the Mayan ruins, and like, I'm sure you've experienced this with with your daughter, like the highs and lows of traveling, like
Yeah.
with a kid. Like the highs are amazing, but the lows are like, holy shit, get me home right now.
Yeah. Especially with three, I can't imagine. I mean, we have one, so it's a lot easier. But man, with three, you need a vacation from the vacation after that.
you know, I mean, what you were saying earlier about like the need for unplugging and and traveling, giving you like some perspective. Like I just remember, being on the resort and we were someplace obviously where my kids would be safe, and there was like a water park there, so we could really just like me and Kim could just like sit and relax and talk to each other, or we would talk to like some of the other parents that were there, and we could just like let our kids play in the water park for like hours, or like play in the beach because the water was like super calm and like not deep. But I just remember after a couple days being there and like just really feeling myself like unwind on such a deep level, and feel my body and like my heart rate like relax on like such a profound level. And like yeah, there's still moments that are like stressful because they're being maniacs, in the restaurant at dinner or whatever, and like running around. But overall, just having that experience of like, okay,
Yeah.
we're someplace warm, we're someplace safe, my kids are happy, I'm not tied to my phone, I can leave it in the hotel room, and that's invaluable. However much it costs, like
Yeah.
it's worth it.
It's worth it. Yep. I totally feel the same way. You need that, you totally need that. And so last year I had a really, really busy year. Our boudoir studio just really took off, and I was really focused on growing that. And we usually go on, a couple trips a year, one road trip and then, a bigger trip. And last year we didn't go on that bigger trip. We just went on the road trip. We went to Maine. My husband's father has a house in Maine, so we visit him there for a week every summer. So we did do that, but we didn't do anything else. And at the end of the year, we have this. My husband and I started this tradition a long time ago. This was like when we first started dating, where the last day of the year for New Year's Eve, we make a list of our top 10, things that happened in that calendar year. And we, after that, I stick them in a spreadsheet so I don't forget. And then the following year,
Of
I
course
can,
you do.
because, yeah, because, you forget. And, I love having it. I love that spreadsheet because, I just have the top 10 little things that were big back then that you just kind of forget. What happens. And then it's a mix of things. It could be, professional accomplishments. It could be personal accomplishments, maybe like home improvements that we were really proud that we got to do that year. Obviously trips, things like that. My daughter being born, that's on the top 10, 2019.
I'm glad she made the top 10.
It's definitely a mix of things. And so when we sat down to make our top 10 last year, listen, we had a great year and we had plenty of things for the top 10. But we looked at the list and we were like, oh my goodness, we didn't travel this year. Like, how did, because we had blocked out some time. I took 6 weeks off from weddings last year, purposely, just to, I thought to travel. But then when it happened, we had gotten so busy and my husband was working on some backyard projects and we were just prioritizing those projects and other things. And it just didn't happen. We decided not to travel. And so I started 2025 thinking, you know what, that's not gonna happen this year. Like we love to travel. We've both of us, we've been to like 40 countries. Like travel is it's always been like a huge part of our lives, and so I started the year out strong. I was like, no, we are blocking out weeks, and we are traveling. So we already went on 2 trips this year. Actually, I went on 3 already. So we're on a roll. It's important, just to get away and reset. Obviously, like gaining perspective on things in so many different ways. So I look forward to doing more of that, this year.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a couple like built-in trips that we go on every year. Because my folks, they spend most of the year down in Florida. So, at least at some point during the winter, we usually go down to visit them, which is always like a nice, a little break from the cold. This year is actually it's not happening until later. We're actually going next week, and then
Nice.
we also usually go to Cape Cod because I grew up going there every summer when I was a kid, and my folks still go up there. So we usually spend a couple days with them up there. What's cool this year is I actually picked up a couple destination weddings that are going to allow my family to come with me as well. So I'm doing
Oh, I love that.
a destination wedding down in the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and it's I don't know, I'm really excited about it. Like the couple is so nice and like so great. They are basically renting out like this giant lodge for like all of their friends and family, and you like stay there for the week. Like everyone like you book a room and it's for the whole week. So they're having everyone come down for the whole week. And obviously there's going to be like a formal like wedding day, like the Friday of that week. But they booked a room for me and my family to come down for the week, and we're going to
That's
go, and like
wonderful.
it's like right on the beach. There's a pool. There's going to be other kids there. Like I'm doing mini sessions for like some of the families that are going to be down there during the week too. So like I don't know. It'll be obviously I'll be working, but anytime you put me like near the beach, like I'm good. It like doesn't feel like a working
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. It's a getaway, it's
Yeah.
a getaway and that's and also just the way, I'm sure your kids are the same way, but when my daughter is in a different environment, exploring and seeing new things, she is I mean, her whole face lights up, her energy is different, her mood is different. So it's that part of it too.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
she loves to travel. She loves packing. She loves unpacking and putting everything in the drawer. She claims the drawer. This is my drawer. All her little things go in there. She loves to travel.
Yeah.
So we love seeing her. Just kind of in different environments. And
That's
see
so
how she
funny because
reacts.
when me and Kim travel, like we just, I don't know, we live out of like we're picking out clothes out of our suitcase.
Oh, I'm like that too.
And
Not her.
and
No,
yeah,
she's got to
Luca,
unpack.
he
Yeah.
like I don't know where he just does it. He just like, oh, this is our drawer. This is where we have to put our clothes. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I know.
it's so
My
cute. It's
daughter
so
calls
funny.
the
Which,
hotel like a home away from home. Is this our
yeah,
home away from home?
but you're so right. Like, it's like obviously the planning and the logistics of travel, like with kids, are harder. It's just harder to get there. But like once you're there, you know, yeah, their faces light up for sure, and they like explore something new. And then I also noticed, especially when they're younger, like they make these like developmental leaps when we travel too. I just remember like thinking, after we would get back from Florida or wherever we were going, just think like they would start talking a little bit clearer, or they would start like
Hmm.
doing something that was like a little bit more advanced and being like it. I don't know. It stimulates their brain in a way that
You're
like
absolutely right. Yeah.
their normal routine just doesn't. And so like I like those experiences for them are so important, and
Yeah.
that's again like one of the things that I've kind of structured. Me and Kim have kind of structured our lives around. Even if it's just like this past winter, we weren't in terms of time and finances, we just like weren't going to be able to swing a trip to Florida. But there were a couple of stretches this winter where it was just like so brutally cold, and we just needed a change of scenery. And I said to Kim, like, let's just go like book a hotel that has a pool and just get away for a couple of days. And we just booked some random like Holiday Inn somewhere, and
I
again
remember
had a
that.
pool,
That's
like
awesome.
had a free breakfast, and we just like you know the kids were so stoked to like be in a hotel room
Yeah.
and like ordering
Oh, yeah.
takeout and having access to a pool and a hot tub. Like
Yeah. Every kid's dream.
yeah, yeah,
Yep. Yeah. No, I get that. And you're totally right about the developmental leaps. So I've been trying to get my daughter to take a shower on her own for a while now. And it's been rough. She's just, she wants mommy. And when we were away last month at the hotel, she decided she just wanted to be by herself in the shower and just take a shower by herself. And I said, okay, great. So she did it the whole time we were there, every day, on the way back to the hotel room. Mommy, I'm going to take a shower by myself. Okay, great. And then we got back, and she said that, yeah, from now on, she was doing it by herself. She didn't need me. So it's been great. The last couple of weeks, she's been just on her own. And it's just like it just took a trip, for her to make that change. So,
Yeah.
yeah, totally got that.
Yeah. It's wild. How like, and I think your daughter and my oldest son are very similar in a lot of ways. Like he's just not ready to do something until he's ready to do it. And once he decides that it's time to do it, it's time to do it.
Yeah.
And then he's like offended if you try and help. So, all right. So what's been like your getting back into like weddings and such, so you're, obviously you've been full time doing this for a long time. You've built up like an associate team. Like, and we've talked about like exit plans as well. Like how much of that are you like willing to share? Like what is your vision for Adalia, like moving forward?
Yeah. So, we're at a very interesting place right now in our business because we had unexpected growth last year in our studio. I never had a brick and mortar, but a couple years ago I decided I wanted a studio. I wanted to shoot more headshots, maternity, newborn. I wanted to host couples, for showing albums and showing them wall art. We're very heirloom focused, and I wanted to be able to do, in-person consults, not in our house anymore because now we have a 6-year-old and there's toys everywhere. So I can't be inviting couples to our house. And so I decided, I wanted to get a place. And so that was like early 2023 that I got the studio in Point Pleasant. And that first year, I did a mix in the studio. It was, yes, I was doing maternity, I was doing newborns, I was doing headshots, I was doing a little bit of boudoir. But I wasn't really sure, and I was doing some consults, but not as many as I thought. Most couples just don't want to drive. They just want to meet over Zoom. They don't want to come down, which is fine. But I started thinking, where do I want this to go? Because I wanted it to become another income stream so that I could slowly start phasing myself out of shooting, 30 plus weddings every year. And I've been cutting down ever since COVID. I've been cutting down on weddings every year. And, but, I need something else to replace. We've gotten used to, a certain salary, and I can't just cut out weddings. That's been our bread and butter. And I thought I would replace, a lot of that with those portraits. And I realized, I really do enjoy photographing maternity and newborns, but mostly for my past clients. If I have a past bride who reaches out, hey, I'm having a baby, would love to come to the studio, for you to photograph us. I love it. I love seeing my past brides again, my past grooms, seeing their families grow. It's great. But when somebody finds me on Google and, I don't know them, it's not that I don't enjoy photographing their baby, but it's different. It is way different. It's a different energy. It's just, I spend a lot more time, obviously getting them comfortable and, the newborn shoots are not easy, with the babies. And I was just finding that I didn't enjoy it as much if I didn't already know the couple. And I didn't enjoy doing it multiple times a week. So I could do 1 or 2 newborns in a week, but that was my max. I could not do more than 2 newborns in a week. Just mentally, it was just too exhausting. And
Yeah.
so,
I've just sorry to interrupt you, but newborn photography is like the one type of photography.
Yeah.
Like post studio newborn is
Yeah.
one thing that I can tell you confidently
Yeah.
I will never do that.
Yeah. It's not easy.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, I could do it a couple times a week, but the consistency just wasn't something, I thought to myself, gosh, if I shoot 10 fewer weddings this year, I have to do this many newborns to make up for that. Can I do that? And that's when I started, experimenting. I thought, you know what, let me see about boudoir, because so many of my brides were asking me at the time, if I could do their boudoir session, and I had dabbled in it a little bit, and I really loved it. But I have a 1,000 square feet, square foot studio, and so it's not big. To be able to do multiple genres very easily, I can do it, but to switch out the sets, it's a lot, the setup time and the takedown and all that. So, but I thought, you know what, let me try this out. And I realized this was last April, that I started marketing for boudoir. And I had great success, total unexpected growth. We ended up shooting about 70, I shot most of them, 70 sessions, boudoir sessions last year. We got so busy that I ended up having to, I asked my associates if they were interested in, shooting boudoir at the studio, because I got burnt out in about August. I was burnt out. It was, I took on a lot. I was still doing weddings, and it was just so busy, but I didn't want to, you know, I thought, what if this is part of my exit plan? Like, that's what I
Mm.
thought. If this is going to grow, to the point where I can have associates photographing, out of my studio, I can open a second location, then, maybe this is part of it. And I just, started to just kind of embrace it as part of that plan. So now I'm seeing that this year I have stepped back from shooting so much. Most of the sessions are not being shot by me; they're being shot by my associates. And actually, there's a session going on right now, and I'm here talking to you. And that has been really, really wonderful. I love creating work for my team.
Mm.
And I love that when I create work for my team, I get to do other things to grow the business.
Mm.
I get to stay home, I'm in my office, I'm behind the computer, and I can do all those things on that to-do list. And I'm still bringing in money for the studio.
Hmm.
And I'm not the one, there.
Right.
So it's been really eye-opening. And my exit plan has now, I told you that nothing is written in stone, and you need to revisit those goals every year because it all changes, And, a year ago, I never would have thought that my boudoir studio would be part of this exit plan, from shooting, as many weddings. And then, obviously in the future, the real exit, right? The big exit. I'm not thinking of retirement yet, but anyway. So, so yeah, that's where I'm at with that. That's
Yeah.
made things very interesting. And then the other thing that's made things interesting is that we're experiencing so much growth now that my husband, I'm retiring my husband from teaching. He put in his letter, I think last week.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
And yeah, so he is done on June 30th. He's going to
Wow.
be leaving teaching. He's been a college professor for about 25 years, but as current college, it hasn't been 25 years. It's been like 22 or something like that. And he's going to come and work he's not going to be shooting. He's going to be more behind the scenes. He's taking care of the post-production side of weddings. So he'll be taking that on and supervising our editing team, our in-house editing team, and also taking care of all of the finances. So I'm going to let go of I'm going to give him my QuickBooks, and he's going to change the password, and I'm never logging into that thing again. It's going to be great. So that's something that, I'm excited to hand off to him. So
Yeah.
those are the big changes, the big things that are going on right now.
Well, I remember at our team day a couple weeks ago, you shared with us, the numbers from your boudoir business, and you know, I was like, wow, like floored, at the numbers. So I mean, that's really cool. And but what you said about like, kind of like reframing the way that you think about goals, right? Like having the goals, but like going back and revisiting them. I think that's like a really healthy way to look at it. Because I mean, like I said, goals have always been something that I've struggled with because I always like, you know, I guess kind of I struggle with like black and white thinking, right? So like I had, if the goal is like written on the page, if it's not achieved that way, like, oh well, it didn't work. It didn't. I didn't achieve it. Whereas in reality, like, and again, this is like more of a kind of a word game for me. Like maybe just calling it like a core value or like something that I'm, like something that I'm striving to, as opposed to a goal to like a core value. Like I feel like the core value makes a little bit more sense to me as like an inner compass. You know what I mean?
Right, I love that idea.
Yeah. So, but I will say this. Getting to be a part of your team has been like a huge blessing for me, and you've just from like a work standpoint, you've created so much work for me and my family. That's been a huge blessing. And one of the other things I wanted to mention too. So like. And maybe this is like the teacher in you. I remember when you first invited me out to lunch, to like get to know each other a little bit. I don't know if we had even met yet. Maybe been the first time that we like met in person. We went out to lunch and then we sat in, your friend's studio, and something that you did, for me, which like no one had ever done, or I hadn't, even thought to ask, was like you asked me to send a couple galleries like of my own weddings to you to like take a look at, and you sat there with me and like did like a gallery critique, and in the moment it felt very like vulnerable and like like a little uncomfortable, but like I learned more in that gallery critique than I had during like years shooting weddings, and because it was like the first time I had let someone else like really, another professional photographer like look at what I was doing, and you had a lot of good things to say, but you were like, but you could also do this, and you could also like create more variety in the gallery by, just like stepping back a few feet or like shooting this one horizontally, and you really instilled in my mind this like wide, mid, tight, and like it got me thinking about the things in my galleries that were like really repetitive, and so I always like think back to that, with like you onboarding me to the team and how you took the time to, not just like tell me what you were looking for, but actually like look at my work and say, this is what, you could be doing, not just for you, but in like your own business too. And then I know you don't have the time to do it as much anymore, but with like the Loom videos after, each wedding, providing feedback on like things that we could have done a little bit differently, or like decisions that we could have made that would have made photos a little bit better. Like you were always really good at offering critiques, but also like I don't want to even say even being like complimentary, because I mean you are complimentary, but like you also understand like the constraints of like the day, and like we're always willing to give us the benefit of the doubt as to like why we did certain things. So like it never felt
Well, I do check the timestamps too. So I'm able to see, oh, wow, her hair wasn't done until this time. This is why it was rushed.
Right.
That's easy to do.
yes, that's true too. But I get like my point is, you were always invested in, my growth as a photographer, not only for the benefit of your team, but also for the benefit of just me as a photographer, Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you, sharing that and also being open, to it. Like I think, and by the way, those Loom videos are coming back. They're going to come back strong this year now that Jay is helping me, because that's one of the things, that I was doing Loom videos a ton, a couple of years ago, and then last year it just kind of fell off. I just couldn't keep up. But that's high on my list this year for being consistent with and that's going to be one of the benefits.
Those were like so instrumental. I'm sorry to cut you off, but like those were so instrumental in like helping me understand what you were looking for, because it was like immediate feedback that I could get from you, because you always tried to do it like pretty fresh, within a couple days of maybe like a week or two of the wedding, so it was like still fresh on our minds. So yeah, like I
Definitely.
always appreciated those.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm glad you do. And you know, I try to make them short too because we're also busy. You know what I mean? And it's not just about me recording it, but it's also I want to be respectful of everybody's time because you guys have a lot going on too. But yeah, something I just thought of something that I wanted to say about yeah giving feedback is you know that's always been I think obviously yeah that comes from the teacher you know background of me. Once a teacher, always a teacher. But also, so my husband likes to tear my work apart. And ever since the beginning, I mean, listen, we share the same office. His desk is right next to mine. And when we would shoot these weddings together, you know, he was always the editor.
Mm,
And before we had our editing team, he edited all the weddings. And so he got, you know, front seat, you know, obviously perspective here on, you know, what I was delivering. And having him next to me, looking at photos and giving me feedback on all those photos for all those years was how I learned to be a better photographer.
mm,
Because when I shot a photo that, or a series of photos that was well exposed, you know, in good light, he was happy. He was happy. It was easy to edit. But when I shot in bad lighting, you know, or crooked photos. Well, now they're in again, but back then, you know, we wanted straight horizons and whatever. So, you know, it was a headache for him, you know, to
mm,
try to make the, you know, if I really loved a photo and I just, you know, the light wasn't great and the skin tones just weren't looking great and I really wanted to deliver it, but, you know, he was having a hard time editing it, then, you know, it was challenging and he would tell me.
mm,
And so that's how we would have conversation after conversation about, you know, how we wanted to approach shooting a wedding day. And I improved so much just from his perspective, you know, from the editing side and also, you know, composition too, but mostly the light and the skin tones. You know, we're obsessed with beautiful, you know, creamy skin tones and I just you know I loved being able to produce a gallery that wasn't going to become a headache for him because remember he was full-time still
mm,
he's been a full-time professor. He was doing this on nights and weekends, and for him to give up an evening going through difficult, you know, editing photos, you know, that were just difficult to edit wasn't fair to him either. So that really inspired me to become a better shooter and look for better light, you know, all those years. So having that feedback, I think, you know, because I learned how valuable it was for me when somebody tears apart my galleries, you know, that, you know, obviously, you know, taught me to do the same, you know, just be more, you know, give constructive criticism and know how helpful it is.
yeah, but I also think you know the way that you structure your business, you know, being really like album and print sales heavy, you know, you always challenge me to like look for variety. And so, you know, like I do think there's something to be said for like maximizing areas where the good light is, you know, and like, you know, just trying to stay in those areas that have the good light like as long as you can. But also like you need to create variety too, right?
Right. And if that
Because
means
you don't.
creating good light somewhere else, then it's worth it. Yeah.
Yes, yes. But like in that process of like looking for more variety, I've like kind of challenged myself to look for good light in areas where I wouldn't have normally tried to shoot, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, that's been, you know, that's changed my perspective too, seeing how couples, what couples choose for their album, what they prioritize, and how they approach, yeah, just choosing photos, because couples are more likely to put images that are more unique in the album versus
Mm,
having spread after spread after spread of the same location in the same light, you
mm,
know, because that to them, especially for the grooms, is going to seem repetitive. Like, well, that's we already have that spot. They look at it in terms of like, okay, we need this from the lake. We already have 3 photos of the lake. Do we need more photos of you know in front of the lake? Why don't we do in front of the building? Why don't we do you know by the flowers? Like you know they're looking for more variety. So.
mm.
So that just you know knowing what the couples are looking for and seeing what they choose for their albums definitely drives my decision making you know on a wedding day as far as how much time we might spend you know
Hmm.
at a specific you know spot.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So funny story about that. I remember like one of the first times I shot for you. I had asked you if I think we were at the reception and dancing was happening, and I asked you, hey, are you into like the shutter drag look at all? And you were like, no, like not really. And so I was like, okay, that's fine, I won't do it. And then I don't know what happened. Like we shot a couple more weddings together, and I think I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it, and I'm just gonna see what see what happens. And if she doesn't use them, that's fine. And you came back to me a few weeks later, and you were like, you know what? That couple, they chose 3 images on like a full spread of that shutter drag stuff.
Oh yeah, I
And
remember what wedding that was. That was a Clark's Landing wedding.
hmm
Yep, I remember what wedding that was, and when that design came back, I was shocked because I put them in there because I thought they were fun. I thought, you know what, let me see. So I put them in, and they ended up in the album.
yeah,
So from that point on,
you know what?
you
And
had my approval.
I think that was a wedding I shot with Marianne with one of your associates. So you weren't there. So I was like, all right, let me see
There.
if I can sneak these in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it worked out. And, that's the thing with adapting,
Mm,
and seeing listening to the couples. It's all about listening to the couples because, I mean, I could have not included them, like you said, I could have left them out. But, as I'm nearing 50 years old, not yet, but as I'm getting closer to that age, I am realizing, like you mentioned before, the age gap is big. And I have to have my pulse on the industry. And, I'm looking to see what couples are looking for. And I talk to them and I ask them, during these conversations, during my consults and everything. And, so yeah, that's why I included those and I continue to include them, and couples continue to put them in the album. So yeah, I mean, we have to listen to the industry, right? And we have to just be more aware of that. Otherwise, we're gonna become, just the outdated photographers, right? We don't want to do that.
yeah. Well, I look at the people who I thought of as outdated when I first started, and now it's weird to think about, but I think you and I kind of came up, and a lot of photographers, we kind of came up in the same kind of school of thought. There was like this one particular educator that we all kind of like prescribed to, and so we all kind of looked for light and did posing the same way. And now I'm thinking to myself, like, is that the new like vintage look? Like, is that the new outdated look? And so I don't know, I don't think it is. Like, I think there's like a timelessness and a classicness to it that will never hopefully never go out of style. Like, couples will always still, hopefully, I would say, like, the majority of couples will still always want those like clean, well exposed, sharp images where like you're looking at the camera for the most part. But there are trends that are recycling and coming back around. The tilted horizons, the motion blur,
Yeah.
being out of focus, like all those things, and the shutter drag during reception, direct flash, like
And the editorial posing, yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I was just having a conversation with my husband last night. I'm shooting my first wedding. So I've been on a break. I shot my first wedding of 2025 was like the first weekend in January, but I haven't shot a wedding since then. So my season starts this Sunday. We're recording this April 3rd. First wedding of the year is this weekend, or second wedding of the year technically, but of my busy season.
hmm
And so I was talking to my husband about it and how, I'm going to be doing some new things this year, and I'm excited, and he said, but, your couple hired you for a specific style. I said, absolutely. And it all goes back to the variety that we were talking to. And it's not like I'm not going to shoot like I normally shoot. That's the way I know how to shoot. Clearly I'm going to shoot that way, but I'm also going to sprinkle a little of this, a little of that. And it doesn't have to be a ton of photos in it doesn't have to be a ton of motion blur. It doesn't have to be a ton of, dragging the shutter, all that, but just like a few photos, throughout the day, pockets of time where you're incorporating that, I think is going to be well received, because the couples are looking for it, and that's what's all over their feeds.
Right. That's
But
what.
that classic timeless look, that's going to stay. That's the core of the gallery. And
Mhm.
then we do a little this, a little of that here and there. So,
Right. Yeah, because they're seeing all that other stuff on like Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. So yeah, I think that's a healthy approach, and I think also like having a second shooter. I'm not even just talking about me, but like having a second shooter who can like sprinkle that stuff in for you too. While you're
absolutely.
getting the getting like the must have, the timeless pose. They could be shooting while you're doing a walking pose where you're trying to get them sharp and like good horizons. Your second shooter can be shooting it diagonally with shutter drag.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
So
I'm excited for the season. I think, there's a lot of new things happening not that, it's happening this year. It started, well before even last year, but it's just more prominent now. Some of these trends just have become more prominent. So I feel like we're at a very interesting, time in the industry. So I'm excited and also a lot of the social media, just documenting all of this. I'm excited to do that too. We're going to be stepping it up this season with the BTS footage and, with our meta glasses and, a lav mic and, things like that. So I'm excited, for all those things that are happening and also documenting it more, showing it off more, so that couples get to know the team more and how we produce the work that we produce, and how we also create consistency throughout our brand. That's
mm,
huge too, because now that I have multiple photographers, couples need to know what they're going to get. We need to make sure expectations are aligned, and so that's part of where the education and all those Loom videos come in too, because I do think one of the most important things that I do of my role is to create that consistency throughout galleries, regardless of who's shooting.
yeah, well, and no matter like where I'm shooting, like when I'm shooting for you, I know what you're looking for, and that comes from like you said, like setting that expectation from the outset. And yeah, like the feedback that I always hear from your couples, like when I'm associate shooting for you, or even when I'm like doing the engagement shoot, it was just how smooth the process was in like whether it was scheduling the session or leading up to the wedding, like getting the timeline done. You like your communication and processes are like on point. So yeah, like again, as a freelancer, like I really want to prioritize the people in the studios that treat me well, but also like the studios and the people that treat their couples well, because I've had the experience of like working for some other studios where there wasn't great communication, and there were always like last minute hiccups, and like as a photographer, the day is stressful enough. Like I don't want to be thrown into a situation where something wasn't communicated, or where the expectation wasn't set right. So like it just makes there's just it adds an element to the day that I don't want to deal with.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you know that's why I've prioritized working for you and like and a handful of like other studios that
Hmm.
really go above and beyond to like treat their couples well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. No, it's important because, yeah, you don't want to come into a wedding if the couple's already had a bad experience figuring out a timeline with the studio, and then you come in and they kind of, think they might even blame you, and you don't want that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Alex, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm really excited for 2025 as well, both with your couples and with my own couples. Yeah.
I'm excited. It's going to be a
Any
great
last
year.
thoughts, any last words?
This was really fun. I don't take the time enough. I had done a couple podcasts years back when I thought I wanted to get into photography education, and maybe I will, in the future. I don't know, but yeah, for a while I did a few, and then I haven't done one in a couple of years already. So this was really fun to do. Thanks for inviting me, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think you have I love the title, also the name, and I'm excited to listen to all the guests you've invited and keeping up with it
Thanks.
on my
So
drive to the
yeah,
wedding.
my point with or my goal for this podcast really is I really don't want to be an education podcast. I really don't want to be like another educator. It's honestly for me it's kind of if that comes as like a byproduct, then cool. Based on like some of the things we talk about, maybe someone will learn something from that. But like for me, again, coming back to this kind of core point of like the reason I love this industry is the people, the people that I get to work with and the couples that I get to serve. So, it's really for me about like people's stories and getting to hear like how they wound up in this wacky, beautiful industry. So I
Right.
appreciate you, sharing your story and spending some time with me today.
I appreciate you, Mike.
All
So
right,
I
Alex.
will be seeing you very soon. Thanks
Yes, you
again,
will.
and I look forward to hearing the episode once it goes live.
Yep, you bet. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
All right, bye
bye.
bye.